Hello! Last week, Wizards of the Coast unveiled their bracket system for Commander, which is meant to refine and expand how players communicate the power levels of their Commander decks in order to have better matchmaking when getting a game. The old system, which was a highly subjective 1 through 10 power scale, didn't work very well, or at all. So, the newly formed Commander format panel, alongside Gavin Verhey, developed this, the brackets system. It's still in the beta testing period, but brackets are nonetheless very clearly defined and, again, replace the former, highly ineffective 1 through 10 power level system. In a shocking turn of events, the Magic the Gathering community expressed opinions about this new system immediately. So immediately, in fact, that it seems well within the realm of possibility that they didn't even get through Gavin Verhey's full 30-minute explanation of the system before reacting to the system. However, as I always do when big news hits the Magic the Gathering community, I wanted to take a few days to gather my thoughts before I shared my full opinions on this new system. Radical concept, I know. If you haven't seen Gavin's video, by the way, you should go watch it. I'll link it in the video description. He does a very good job articulating the new system and the thought process behind it. He even spends a solid 15 minutes at the end of the video answering in detail more than a dozen questions that the Commander format panel have anticipated players asking. I highly recommend actually watching the video before you form your final opinions on this. And so, after careful consideration and listening to the thoughts of other community members, here is what I think of the 5-tiered bracket system. It's great for what it is. What exactly do I mean by that, and what problems or concerns do I still see? Well, in this video, I'll provide my complete thoughts on the Commander bracket system. I'll explain how well I think this bracket system succeeds at defining power levels in a format that is inherently resistant to such definition. I'll also go into specific detail about the new Game Changers list. Did the panel choose the right cards? Are there cards that should have been included, or cards that were included that shouldn't have been? Should there even be a Game Changers list at all? Is having an additional list of cards on top of the existing ban list too much information for the average player to keep track of? I'll cover all of this and more, and please, before you start typing comments about how I'm a WotC shill or an outrage factory, please just hear me out. This is a big subject, and it's worth evaluating thoughtfully rather than jumping to speak on your initial gut reaction. So with all that being said, let's talk about brackets. But first, is the mattress that you sleep on really a 4-mana red sorcery from Phyrexia, All Will Be One, because it keeps awakening the sleeper? If you want to be a 3-mana blue aura from Bloomborough and have a charmed sleep instead, you should give a mattress from Helix Sleep a try. Helix Sleep, sponsor of today's video, that is. Helix Sleep makes premium mattresses customized to fit your needs and conveniently shipped to your door. Helix has a personalized sleep quiz that matches you with the perfect mattress for your body type and sleep preferences. When I took the Helix Sleep quiz, it matched me with the Helix Luxe Dusk mattress, and I'm being 100% genuine here. I absolutely love it. I sleep so much better now than I did on the monstrosity I had before. I keep working with Helix because I legitimately love sleeping on their mattress that much. Helix mattresses come rolled up in a box and are super easy to set up. They even offer free shipping within the United States. A new mattress can feel like a daunting investment. You can't really get an accurate idea of how comfortable one will be to sleep on when you're just plopping down on it in a mattress store for 5 minutes. You need to actually be able to sleep on the mattress. Otherwise, how can you really be 100% sure? Well, that's why Helix offers a 100-night sleep trial, so that you can test out the mattress and ensure you really love it. Their mattresses also include a 10-year warranty, and they offer financing options and flexible payment plans. And you want to know what the best part is? Well, it's that this is the best time to get yourself a Helix mattress, because Helix is offering my followers a partner offer for President's Day. Visit helixsleep.com/Tolarian to get 27% off your mattress. That's helixsleep.com/Tolarian. A charmed sleep is not far away. Thank you, Helix Sleep, for sponsoring this video. The new system is fairly straightforward. Every deck in Commander is divided between 5 distinct power tiers. These tiers each have their own specific philosophy in both deck building and the kinds of games you'd like to play, such as how specific kinds of game warping effects like tutors, mass land denial, extra turns, and infinite combos fit into their ecosystems. To facilitate the tiers, the Commander format panel has also put together a Game Changers list of cards that tend to, well, change the tenor of the game when played. The first 2 tiers do not allow for any cards from the Game Changers list, and the top 2 tiers allow you to run as many of the Game Changer cards as you'd like. The middle tier is the middle ground, where you can run up to 3 Game Changers cards. Let's take a brief look at what each tier is intended to delineate. Tier 1 is for janky decks, or decks that are entirely about self-expression. Winning doesn't matter to these decks so much as getting to accomplish something cool or unique when playing. Gavin's examples here were a horses themed deck and a deck that all revolves around the number 4. But I'm sure you can imagine a myriad of different kinds of decks that would fall into this tier. Heck, maybe you already have a Tier 1 deck built already. I know I do. Tier 2 has been dubbed the Core tier, which should tell you that Wizards of the Coast envisions this tier as the foundation of Commander. Consider this tier the default tier, which is to say any deck you built will land in this tier by default, unless you've made decisions in deck building that bump it down to Tier 1 or up to one of the higher tiers. Most precons fall into this tier. This is good, clean gameplay marked by long games and none of those effects that tend to warp games. Tier 3 is the upgraded tier, which is where most decks that aren't Tier 2 end up. This is the tier where you've taken a pre-con level deck and you've started to improve upon it with cards in your collection or that you pick up over time. You might have a few particularly powerful cards in your deck, but you haven't fully streamlined the deck's gameplay yet. Tier 4 is the optimized tier, which as Gavin says in his video, is the highest power level tier most Commander players will ever come up against. There are no holds barred in deck building, except that you are still building your deck the way you want to build it rather than warping it for some larger metagame in mind. Oftentimes, decks in this tier are gated in power level by their Commander. You can optimize your Ariete of the Charmed Apple deck to your heart's content, but it's never going to be able to compete with the average CEDH deck. Tier 5, therefore, is CEDH, which is everything CEDH has always been. In fact, all these tiers are tiers that essentially already existed before the Commander format panel formalized them, which brings me to the next section of this video. Why this system works. Okay, at this point, you've probably developed a pretty good sense of what I think about the system, but I'll state it explicitly now. For the initial framework for a beta test period, this system is fantastic, especially once you take into account the Q&A that Gavin provided in the second half of his video. Now, in order for me to fully illustrate why I think this system works so well, I first must explain why the previous system, if you can even call it that, never worked. It's very hard to argue that the previous system, with its informal power level 1 through 10 nomenclature, ever made any sense. Hence the many, many jokes people made about, my deck is a 7. I even made those jokes myself. See, in this episode of Shuffle Up and Play. And this one over here, which you should watch. But the reason those jokes were made is because the idea of assigning a power level to your Commander deck is arbitrary, subjective, and overall meaningless in Commander. And as a side note, I love that Gavin specifically mentioned the Commander format panel chose to move away from the word power as an indicator, citing cards like Swords to Plowshares and Counterspell as powerful cards that fit just fine into casual games as reasoning. Card power is not the concern. Gameplay patterns are the concern. Moving back to the power level 1 through 10 system though, and putting aside its subjective and arbitrary nature, the fundamental flaw in operating within 10 tiers of power levels is that the system is far too granular. I mean, what is the difference between a power level 6 and a power level 7? How about a power level 7 and a power level 8? That's the joke I made by doing this is the episode where they're all power level 7 Commander decks. This is the episode where they're all power level 8 Commander decks. What's the difference? If you draw too many cutoff points between the vast gradient of possible commander deck configurations, then any given cutoff point starts to lose its meaning. The balance to strike is distinguishing enough categories that you encompass the whole format with reasonable accuracy without creating so many categories that the lines start to blur together. And personally, looking at this new bracket system, I think 5 is the perfect number of categories to create. As Gavin said in his video, the new system is essentially a 3-tiered system with an appendix tier on either side of the 3 primary tiers to catch any remaining outliers. The vast majority of decks in Commander fall into tiers 2, 3, or 4. Essentially, you have to go out of your way to build a tier 1 or a tier 5 deck. It's unlikely to happen organically through expressive iteration. We've all got a pretty good sense of what kind of games the average pre-con caliber deck is capable of playing. We all have a vague but meaningful idea of what an upgraded pre-con deck looks like, one that gets to include that sweet $50 card you pulled in a premium pack, but you didn't go all out on filling the 99 with every single best-in-slot card available for it. And finally, we all know what a fully optimized, highly synergistic commander deck looks like, because we've all seen Josh play on game nights. He is the problem. Attack Josh first, but I digress. Joking aside, we've all seen those fully optimized decks without any pet cards that are focused on winning as best they can, without the kind of generic homogeneity in the 99 that you'd see at a CEDH table. Now, do these 3 categories of deck perfectly encapsulate every single kind of commander deck that would fall into them? No. Of course not. But if you ask me, I think they come pretty darn close. If you can think of an entire 4th category of deck that would fall somewhere in between the core tier and optimized tier, by all means, I'd love to hear it. But I've thought a lot about this since Gavin released his video, and I personally can't think of what these categories miss. Except, of course, the 1st and 5th tiers. Recognizing that there's a tier of deck below pre-con level is a key component to what makes this system work. It's actually the biggest miss that I had in my Commander Point System proposal video that I released last year. There's a level of Commander deck that is not remotely competitive, or even particularly capable of winning reliably, that many Magic the Gathering players love to play with nonetheless. A deck helmed by Chandler, for instance. Yes, Chandler, a real legendary creature that you can legally put in your command zone. You simply cannot create a meaningful commander delineation system that does not account for this category of deck. Likewise, the CEDH contingent of the commander format panel were right in saying that there is a clear distinction between optimal decks and CEDH decks, though Gavin doesn't go into this distinction in that much detail. In my opinion, the best way to describe the difference is a question of synergy. Does your commander ask you to build around a specific theme or kind of card, or is it kinda just great no matter how you build your deck? How many slots in your deck are devoted to cards that do not directly or indirectly synergize with your chosen commander? If a solid third of your deck or more consists of generically powerful cards that would show up in any no-holds-barred deck in your commander's colors, then you've probably designed a CEDH deck rather than an optimal deck. Of course, the entire system that the Commander Format panel is proposing hinges on the efficacy of the Game Changers list at formalizing the kinds of cards that distinguish between tiers 2, 3, and 4. So let's talk about that. In Gavin's video, he explains why every single card that's been included on the Game Changers list is there. Many of the cards are associated with one another, as they do a similar game-changing thing. There's 40 cards on the list as of right now, and Gavin already does a good job articulating the Commander Format panel's justification for each of them. So I'm not going to go over each card individually. Again, watch Gavin's video for more details. The list itself is intended to be stress tested during the beta period, and will likely change somewhat by the time the bracket system is formalized. Again, I encourage people to contribute by joining the discussion. Gavin really is taking feedback from the community, as is the Commander Format panel. Instead, I want to talk about the list as a broader concept. I think having a list like this that formally notates a subset of cards that are legal in Commander but tend to have a warping effect on the game is a really good idea. It's kind of like a much simpler version of creating a point system for Commander. You're not making a claim on which of these 40 cards are better than others, but you are drawing a clear line in the sand between these 40 cards and the rest of the legal card pool. I do think it's a little murky that there are additional subsets of cards not on the Game Changers list that nonetheless get the Game Changers treatment. Cards that fall into the categories of mass land denial, 2-card winning combos, and multiple extra turns. This is made especially true because certain cards that do fall into these categories, like Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger, Thassa's Oracle, and Expropriate, were included on the Game Changers list. I don't necessarily disagree with this choice, mind you. I just don't think Gavin explained this quite adequately. For the most part, though, I love the existence of the Game Changers list. I especially love that it's a de facto watch list of sorts for problematic, potentially ban-worthy cards. I've advocated for a watch list for a while now, so it's great to see a version of that finally get implemented here. I also think the potential that the Game Changers list creates for certain cards on the ban list to maybe come off the ban list is really, really exciting. I actually made a whole video of cards I'd love to see unbanned not too long ago, and I think there are a ton of cards currently banned in Commander that could very easily be unbanned and immediately relegated to the Game Changers list. I strongly believe this would be a massive win for the Commander format. I'm all for unbannings, and I always have been. There are a few specific cards on the list I'd like to address. While I agree with almost all of the Commander format panel's choices, I do think there are a few cards, like Trouble in Pairs, Jessica's Will, and Vorinclex, for instance, which I believe scale reasonably well with deck power level. I don't think a Bracket 2 deck that runs Jessica's Will is meaningfully stronger than a Bracket 2 deck that swaps Jessica's Will for, say, Wheel of Fortune, which isn't on the Game Changers list, by the way. In fact, there are no Draw 7s on the list besides Jin-Gitaxi's, which I find a little odd, but I'm sure the Commander format panel had their reasons. There's a reasonable argument to be made that Vorinclex, an otherwise low-tier deck, is weaker than Nyx Bloom Ancient. Dies to Removal is a silly argument against a card being strong, but it really applies to more expensive creatures like Vorinclex. That said, I think the Commander format panel's justification for all 3 of these cards, along with the other 37 cards on the list, all makes enough sense to me that I'm perfectly content to start with these cards on the list for beta testing purposes. Remember, Rule 0 will always apply to Commander. There is one way that Rule 0 fails to fill in the gaps here, though. It's a lot harder to Rule 0 other problematic cards onto the Game Changers list than it is to Rule 0 them off of the list for a given game. I therefore think in general it's better to err on the side of including more cards on the Game Changers list than less. I would have probably included a couple more cards, like Food Chain and Worldly Tutor, for instance. I'm honestly surprised Green as a whole got away with so many of its best cards, staying off the list given it's historically been one of the best colors in Commander. I'm also not convinced that the legendary creatures chosen for the list are the precise ones that should have been chosen, or that there weren't other commanders worthy of inclusion on the list. Tymna, Thrasios, and Krum, for instance, are all cards that basically only see play in CEDH tables, so why not include them on the list? That being said, I do also understand why they didn't want to put too many cards on the list for the beta testing system. Depending on how many cards the Commander format panel decides to unban in April, the list could swell considerably in just a few months' time. In closing, I want to leave you with the same request that Gavin left us all with at the end of his video. Give the new system a shot. See how it plays out. You can actually do so by going over to the TCC Discord server for a free game, 100% free, of Webcam Commander. We offer free access to our general and looking for games sections, and all you have to do is go to discord.gg/Tolarian Community College. Again, 100% free games of Webcam Commander in a moderated system that is now encouraging the brackets system. And remember, the thing that the brackets system is trying to do is very, very hard. Trust me, I literally made a whole video trying to do the same thing on my own. And honestly, being real honest here, and I'm not just saying this because I'm friends with many members of the Commander format panel, but I think the system they came up with is better than the one I proposed last year. This new bracket system is simple, logical, and coherent. I strongly believe that after a couple of months of beta testing and plenty of feedback from players like you, the final form will be a huge success. At least, I hope it will be, and I think you should hope so too. But now I want to hear from you. What do you think of the new bracket system? Are there aspects that you would tweak? Are there cards that should or should not be on the Game Changers list? Let me know in the comments below. Maybe Gavin will read your comment because Little Bird tells me he's going to be reading comments on this video, and maybe he'll be convinced of your point of view. But please, when you leave a comment, be respectful. Remember that the Commander format panel genuinely has the format's best interest at heart. And remember, we do of course offer those free web games of Commander on the Tolarian Community College Discord server. Access is 100% free. Just go to discord.gg/Tolarian Community College and maybe try out the new bracket system for yourself. And remember, a great night's sleep is just a Helix mattress away. Helix mattresses are delivered right to your door. You take a special sleep quiz to make sure that you've got the best one paired to you. And for real, I actually sleep on a Helix mattress. I love them. I've been sleeping on it for years, and it's still the best mattress I've ever had. And you can try a Helix mattress out right now. Yeah, right now. That's because Helix offers a 100-night sleep trial so that you can test out the mattress and ensure you really love it. You need a great mattress for a great night's sleep, and Helix mattresses are just that. Best of all, for President's Day, Helix is offering my followers 27% off their mattress. Just go to helixsleep.com/Tolarian. That's helixsleep.com/Tolarian. A charmed sleep is not far away, and thank you, Helix Sleep, for sponsoring this video.
Next time on Shuffle Up and Play.
We're talking about Brexit again on Shuffle Up and Play. We have brought our pet decks. Maybe not the most powerful Commander decks, but some of our favorites from over the years that we just can't put down and can't stop tuning up.
Hey, anyone want to concede quickly?
Thank God, I'm out of here.
Nice.
Get him, get him!
I don't like bowing to politics, but
Bow to me.
Ailey is right. Wow, okay.
I think the kids started thinking that the word bussin' is cringe.
If it wasn't before, it is
now.
I just want to see you hoisted on your own petard, man. Like, you pay 20, like, don't make the minion and then just sit there? Do you have a Gru cosplay?
No!
Normally, it's over the head. I'm a parent of a small child.
Okay.
I Urza hate minions.